Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
When I was a kid, the two boots that everyone wanted, worn by all the most popular players, were the Nike Mercurial and the Adidas Predator. And somehow in 2024, that has happened again. So while this might seem like a little bit of a weird comparison, it's everything that I love about football boots in that you have two amazing performers that offer completely different experiences. This of course begs the question, which one is better? The Adidas Predator 30 Elite FT or the Nike Zoom Mercurial Superfly 9 Elite? With both of these being the two most expensive models within their respective lineups, $275 at full retail for the Superflies and $280 at full retail for the FT version of the Predator 30. However, both boots do offer cheaper alternatives that more or less offer the same experience, just a bit of a different look in the $260 Predator 30 without the fold-over tongue, and the Nike Zoom Mercurial Vapor 15 Elite, which is the low-cut version of the Superfly. Early colorways retail for $250, later ones retail for $260. All of which, by the way, you can get below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the links down below. When it comes to feel for the ball, you have two boots that I don't necessarily want to say are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but they definitely feel different in that the Vaporposit Plus upper of the Mercurial is obviously very thin. It has a little bit more of a structured, kind of firmer feel to it, but still relatively flexible in terms of how it moves with your foot. No extra padding whatsoever, minimal amounts of additional grip, and in general, if you're just looking for that raw barefoot feel, this is pretty well one of the best options out there. Where alternatively, the Predators are still a synthetic football boot, but they feature Adidas's Hybrid Touch 2.0, which is a relatively thin synthetic material, but one that definitely has more leather-like qualities in terms of just being a little bit softer, slightly more padded, and definitely more pliable, while still allowing for decent structure. So despite not necessarily being marketed as a speed boot like the Mercurial, these are still going to feel locked in and responsive on your feet, especially because of that nice deep lacing system. In terms of actual grip on the ball, however, there is a big difference here in that the finish on the surface is kind of like this matte, almost soft touch finish where it's slick on the ball but without being overly slippery. And then of course you do get the strike skin elements, kind of imitating what we've seen on past Predator models, providing tons and tons of additional grip on the ball, particularly noticeable when passing and definitely shooting, where I feel like generating spin is significantly easier in these versus the Mercurials. However, the sense of control from the super thin upper is something that a lot of people also really like. So while the Preds definitely feel more powerful, depending on personal preference, you might find that the Mercs are the more powerful boots for you. To put it in the simplest terms possible, the ball feels like it explodes off of the Mercurials because of how thin and raw it is versus kind of sticking to the upper for at least a split second in the case of the Predators, kind of giving a little bit more of a sense of control versus the explosiveness of the Mercurials. In other words, pick your poison. When it comes to sole plates and stud patterns, they're not as dissimilar as you might expect. In the case of the Predator, it's definitely a little bit more of a traditional layout in terms of being a solid piece of plastic, some support and structure running through the heel as well as the midfoot, and the stud pattern itself is the classic Adidas layout that we've been getting for quite some time now, but with these kind of three-sided triangular shaped studs that will still provide plenty of bite in a sole plate that overall is more on the flexible side. So if you're looking for that quote-unquote normal feel from the sole plate, you get more of that from the Preds versus the Mercurials, where this I think is the flagship speed boot sole plate on the market right now, and that it is a plastic top layer, of course, stiff through the heel as well as the midfoot. However, you have that air zoom insert basically running from the toe into kind of the 3/4 part of the midfoot that really does give this sensation of comfort and springiness underfoot. Nike does of course promote it as a speed element, and do I think that this air zoom unit underneath your foot is going to make you faster? Absolutely not, but the sensation of speed from a Mercurial in general is still very much present in this new model, with the added benefit of, I think, a ton of comfort from that internal cushioning element. And then of course, as far as the stud pattern is concerned, you do also have kind of like a three-sided shape for at least the studs in the forefoot, but in general, they're sharper, narrower blades that just dig into the ground more aggressively than what you're gonna find from the Preds, and a sole plate that in general just feels a lot more springy. So if you're looking for that more traditional speed boot feel, it's definitely going to come from the Mercurials, whereas if you want a little bit more of a solid sensation underfoot, something slightly more flexible, you might prefer that of the Predator. When it comes to weight, I think quite a few people will be surprised at the difference between these two, because obviously back in the day, the Mercurials were always some of the lightest boots that you could buy, where the Predator series was never about being as light as possible. However, the modern day Predator, despite how it looks, is constructed in a very different way than the heyday of the Predator series. So both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Preds, throw them on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.7 ounces, the equivalent of 218 grams. So relatively lightweight, certainly lighter than Preds used to be, but nothing mind-blowing. And then here is, of course, the Superfly 9 Elite. They weigh in at 6.95 ounces, the equivalent of 197 grams. So you're talking about a weight difference of 21 grams, if my math is correct, which is a noticeable amount. Certainly the Mercurials feel lighter than the Predators, but in general, if your expectation with something, especially that looks like this, is that they're going to feel heavy and chunky on your feet, that is definitely not the case. When it comes to fit and comfort, these two boots could not be more different. From a comfort perspective, they're both comfortable, but they achieve that result in very, very different ways, where I would argue the Mercurial, for a football boot that has that signature Mercurial super tight wrap around your foot, is very comfortable. It doesn't squeeze your foot so aggressively where blisters become an issue or foot cramping. Obviously, there's gonna be some time that's required to get used to the way that they fit if you're not accustomed to wearing football boots as tight as these are. But once you do get used to them, I think the comfort, considering how tightly they wrap your foot, is quite good. And obviously, if you want that one-to-one kind of super reactive, responsive sensation, this is the best way to get that. This has been the gold standard for a long time, whereas the Predator is more comfortable in a traditional way, in that the hybrid touch material does have some leather-like qualities in terms of being more pliable, a little bit softer. As you wear them in, they soften up even further. The nice deep central lacing system, U-throat construction, and standalone tongue makes putting them on and taking them off significantly easier than the one-piece upper construction of the Mercurials. And for me personally, I find it to be a lot more comfortable, but comfort at the end of the day is also very much about personal preferences. So it does depend on what you like. From a width perspective, there's obviously a lot more width to the Predator when compared to the Mercurials, pretty well all the way through. If you have wider feet, the Preds are going to be better for you than the Mercs, but that is not to say that these still won't fit most people. Again, it just depends on if you want a slightly more relaxed fit from the Pred or a really tight fit from the Mercurial. When it comes to sizing, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So whether you're going for the Preds or the Nikes, going true to size is what I would strongly recommend in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, and perhaps unsurprisingly, these are not exactly comparable football boots. They're very different in so many ways. However, to impressionable teenagers, something that I once was, you're still going to be choosing between these two boots because they're worn by some of the best players in the world right now. So with that in mind, I think the safe bet between these two for the vast majority of people is probably going to be the Mercurials, because it's kind of along the lines of what you've likely been playing in for quite some time now, especially if you've been a longtime fan of the Mercurial series. If that's the type of fit and feel that you like, I really don't think there's much of a reason right now to stray outside of what the Superfly or the Vapor have on offer. It's a top performing boot in just about every single way. However, when it comes to the experience side of a new pair of football boots, I think what's so exciting about the new Predator 30 Elite particularly the FT model with the fold over flap tongue. While this does nothing for the overall performance, aesthetically, it's something so different from everything else out there. And in terms of the package on offer, the combination of the hybrid touch synthetic with these kind of more traditional Predator rubber striking elements really does make for an experience that you will not find from any other football boot right now. It's tough for me to say that it's old school. There are definitely some related elements to classic Predators, but at the same time, these still feel very modern. Are you going to like the Preds more than the Mercurials if you're more used to a boot like this? That's really difficult to say. But for me, given the choice between these two, especially being a fan of the power boot era, I would definitely choose the Preds over the Mercs. But that's just me. Which one would you pick?